I want to hear it from you, man, the king of deer woods.
Knowing what I know now, I probably could have killed a third.
It's crazy how, the changes that you need to make really sometimes ain't that big. I think a lot of the conversations we have when we're talking about deer hunting will be relatable to the people that follow along with us.
You're listening to the Hunt More Official Podcast with Jonathan Moore and Hunter Myrick. By diving into their past experiences, this podcast is going to focus on the learning process of hunting big bucks in the South. Follow along and let's hunt more official.
As we begin, let's go ahead first and let's welcome all the listeners, folks that are listening to us chit chat to the podcast. Episode 1, Myrick, something we've talked about for a year. And it's kind of just been not happening for a year, but hey, we're going to do it now. I'll let everybody know that if you hear some random noises, it's because this is happening in my bait shop. And so my refrigerator's right here. My helper is going to pull back up in a little bit in his diesel truck, and it's going to be screaming loud. I mean, whistling diesel, son. So just beware. I would say let's first talk a little bit about what this podcast is going to be about. I think a lot of the conversations we have when we're talking about deer hunting will be relatable to the people that follow along with us. Most people that listen and watch our channel are kind of like us. They don't own 1,000 acres. And so growing deer is kind of tough. Managing deer is kind of tough. And you just kind of have to do the best you can with what you got. So we're going to start out. The first topic of today is going to kind of talk about the season that we just had. So I want to hear it from you, man, the king of deer woods. How's that season been?
I guess it depends on how you weigh it. Depends. Is it a good season based off kills, or is it a good season based off opportunities?
I'm an opportunities guy, but let's go opportunities first.
Opportunities first, okay. I killed one during bow season. That one worked out just the way it's supposed to. Had an opportunity on another, didn't execute. If I could go back, knowing what I know now, I probably could have killed a third.
Right.
He did everything you could ask him to do. I didn't do what I needed to do to be ready for that situation. So, kill some does. My wife has shot everything that moved. So, other than from a freezer feeling standpoint, we're good. We're eating.
Right, you're going to eat good all year long.
Yeah.
And
that's from a mature buck standpoint, it's been more of an opportunity rather than an execution this year, which I know you can kind of relate to that.
Oh, for sure. I would agree. My season was very good in regards to opportunities. It's probably one of the better seasons I've ever had in regards to opportunities. I had the chance at that velvet deer early in the year that kind of popped up out of nowhere, and just took a bad shot, missed him, and then I ended up shooting a couple does in between that. I had some good deer to hunt early on. Wishbone, some of the folks who listen will know about him, and Holyfield. And those deer just kind of ended up, leaving. One of them possibly died or got shot or something, but they just kind of disappeared. And so the middle part of the year was kind of slow for me in regards to seeing bucks, but then around December it started picking up. I shot that buck with Chip that night that fell in the creek, which was that beat everything I've ever seen. I cannot imagine. I can't believe that happened, dude. But that happened, and so that tag went unfilled. Then I shot the deer that I killed. That one's sitting out here next to me. 8-point. He was the best deer that I had on that piece of property, and kind of the most regular deer that I had probably since like the end of November. So I was proud of that. I kind of had pictures of him in a lot of different places, and kind of strategized to put myself in the best spot to kill him, and I ended up killing him where I figured I would kill one of those bucks out there, and then ended the year on a hunt that kind of was a lot like last year. Hit him in that pocket, that low pocket.
Your favorite spot.
Just the perfect spot to not kill him. And I don't know if that deer lived or died or what. We put the dogs on him and never found him. I didn't have a lot of pictures of that deer. I thought he was a new deer, but when I ended up going back and kind of looking through pictures from the year, I had him 2 or 3 different times, probably a month or so apart, and he was 3.5, 4.5 years old probably. If I had it to do over again, I would have let him walk. I think I kind of got buck anxiety. I wouldn't say buck fever. I'd say anxiety.
You got trigger happy.
I was trigger happy, son. I was ready to tag out. And so, I mean, it was a perfect hunt. Perfect hunt. Great footage. He come right to the tree almost, 20-yard shot, and kind of hit a limb and fell out low. Never found him. So, in regards to opportunities, it was a good year for both of us, I would say. Is there anything that you would say you learned this year? You've been doing this a lot longer than me, so.
I spent most of my season at a new property, so there was a lot I learned.
Yeah.
So, in regards to learning the property, yes. In regards to learning something new, I mean, not necessarily, I guess you could say.
Well, when I say learn, I would say I'm more so kind of talking about properties than I am anything. I mean, obviously the folks that are listening don't know the property you were hunting, but I mean, just tell me some of the things you learned about that place.
Well, one thing I did learn that's kind of frustrating is once gun season comes in, you might as well just stay in your bed and just take your cameras away. That's one thing I did learn. So I would say this time, next year, after bow season passes, I'll probably move on to another property. That's one thing I did learn about the place.
Right.
And, there's still a lot of learning now because a lot of the trails that I'm seeing now, you couldn't necessarily see early in the year because it was so dry.
Uh-huh.
Now everything was getting wet. You can kind of see how they're using the property, how they're using those hills to their advantage.
Right.
And I learned changing your access, one ridge versus another, difference between seeing a deer during daylight and not seeing a deer during daylight.
Right. I mean, that's what happens when you shot.
Yeah. I was going in one way, and I kept not seeing them. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go in this way today just to see. And it's 4:30 on the nose. Here he comes.
That's crazy.
And all I did was I dropped in off a different hill. That's it.
It's crazy how, I mean, the changes that you need to make really sometimes ain't that big. I mean.
Right. I mean, in that case, it was just as simple as accessing the hill that was 150 yards south of the hill I was coming in off of.
Wow.
So, I mean, I would say that's the biggest thing that I probably took away this year was access.
Yeah.
Because another opportunity I had, I went in one way the first day, no luck. Went in a different way the next day. 4:30, here he comes. Just didn't execute.
Crazy, dude.
So I would say access. I would say doubling back on your access and thinking more about your access is probably the biggest thing I learned this year.
I would tell you, I mean, I know if nobody else is listening to this podcast, Jackson Curls is listening to this podcast, and he could attest that over the last 2 or 3 years, I have talked with you a lot more about access. And even for myself, that is one of the biggest things that I paid attention to this year, was how I was accessing these places.
I think it's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to if you can hunt over bait or not.
Right.
Because more than likely he's coming if he's around.
Yeah.
Maybe let's just say the conditions are right for him to daylight on that day. You got the wind. Mm-hmm. It's a good cool afternoon. Mm-hmm. He's coming. Mm-hmm. Assuming you don't bump him or bump other deer on your way in. Mm-hmm. So I would honestly say access is probably one of the bigger. It's probably one of the most overlooked factors for sure. Yeah. But also, even if you're not hunting over bait, you're still technically more than likely hunting a food source.
Right, yeah.
So how you access that food source to hunt it, whether you're hunting on that food source, in between that food source and where they're bedding.
Right.
How you get in and out is going to
the biggest thing.
Easily determine if you daylight or not, or if he knows you're there and won't daylight in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's something, I mean, like early on, I never really paid attention to. I mean, most of the time I was kind of hunting with other folks, and they were just like, all right, you go this way to get to the stand. I didn't think one thing about where the deer were. I was just trying to figure out, I was just going to my tree, man. But once I started, I mean, I went through some years where I was very unsuccessful. I mean, like in regards to not even seeing deer. I mean, not deer nowhere around me. To starting to think about my access, and just in the last 2 years, it's amazing to me. Some folks it's really not that big of a deal, but to me it's been amazing how many deer I have seen, bucks specifically, on some of the places that I've got, just because of how I'm getting in and out. And that doesn't mean to say that like your access is perfect. I mean, next year deer could kind of switch up and be in a different spot, and you may have to change it again.
Well, yeah, a different tree could be hot that year.
That's right, yeah.
It could be 50 yards this way rather than 50 yards the other direction.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right. I would agree with you. I mean, I kind of learned a lot of the same stuff when it comes to access. I did learn some spots that bucks like to bed on, like that 150 acres that I killed this 8-point off of. I kind of figured out one little section of that place, I think, how they're using it in regards to the wind. It was that place that Holyfield was early in the year. And, I mean, I've never wished I could go back and do it over again more than I do with that deer right there, because I think he was where he wanted to be when I first found him. And the more I went in there, like I kept using the same access, kept feeding in the same spot. I mean, he would ghost for 10 days to 2 weeks, and then as the season came in, it got to where he was only at night. I mean, just like one of those nocturnal situations, he's only at night. And I think after killing this buck, I think I figured out where he was bedded. I think this deer that I shot was kind of using that place very similar to how he was using it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that you're not gonna learn unless you hunt.
Yeah.
You right. Can't just rely on your cameras to tell you that. You actually got to go in the woods and booger it up.
Yeah.
To learn what not to do.
And I tell you, I mean, that's the biggest thing I would say. The best thing that I'd say you've taught me in the last couple of years is not to be scared to booger it up, because that's the only way you're gonna figure it out. It's the only way you're gonna figure out what the deer are doing, or how they're using a property, or how they want to use a property. Or whether or not they're seeing you come in and go out. Hey, we're going to pause right here because I got a dude coming in to buy bait. All right, we there?
Yeah. We're on a roll, too. They kind of mess us up.
Gosh, it stinks,
we're rolling
man.
good.
Hey, welcome to our life, folks. This is how it goes. I mean, we work all the time. It's a wonder our kids ain't running in screaming right now. But I guess that's a good thing about work. We get a little break, huh?
Yes, sir. A good break.
So learning, we were talking about learning. Early season, I possibly bumped some deer. I was kind of talking about Holyfield. I probably ran him off. And we were talking about that on the phone yesterday too. Let's talk real quick. I think this will be something interesting for folks to hear. Stacked bedding, like how deer bed, does, smaller bucks, big bucks. I think that's kind of the situation that I ran into early in the season, especially in the summer. I had a bunch of deer on that property, and then as hunting season came in, after about a month and a half in, you could kind of tell that there was like less and less deer, and your does were moving a little bit later. And if you don't know, what's interesting to know is that the bedding is kind of stacked. The more deer you can hold on your property, you're still going to have like does bedding up front, smaller bucks bedding farther back behind them, and then your bigger bucks bedding back off of that. But as you push in there and pressure it, I mean, it would make sense, right, Myrick, that deer just kind of back up and eventually would leave?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the easiest way to visualize that would be, let's say your corn pile is the destination. That is the destination food source on that particular property.
Right.
Typically, when you hunt that, you see your does first.
Mm-hmm.
Then you see your spikes, your 6 points, and then 30 minutes before dark till dark. That's typically when you're most likely to see your big deer.
Right.
So there's a reason. I'll say there's a reason for that, because that's how they're going to stack their beds in relation to that food source.
Mm-hmm.
So as you put pressure on those deer, let's say you push those does further back.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're coming in an hour before dark. And now your younger bucks are getting in there in that prime window, that 30 minutes before dark, to dark, and now your bigger deer are after dark. It's not necessarily because they just left and they just don't want to daylight anymore.
They're just bedding farther away.
They're just bedding a little further away.
God, man, I'm just reliving like the whole month of October. I was sending you pictures every morning. I'd send you like 3 or 4 pictures of Holyfield and be like, bro, look at him. He's in there again. He's in there again. But he was always in there 45 minutes to an hour after dark, and then like 45 minutes before daylight, hour before daylight.
That's another thing, though, I think is not understood. Like, sometimes they're just not your deer. Like, they're coming to eat your corn, and they're leaving. They're coming to eat your food plot, and they're leaving. They're not yours. I mean, they're coming a long ways off, and they're transitioning back to their core area right before daylight. But also, like I've told you in the past, I don't care where those deer spend their nighttime hours.
Right.
I only care where they're at during the day. I can care less. They can go eat your corn at night. As long as they're eating my corn during the day. I don't care. Right. You get 1,000 pictures. I'll take my 10 and I'll send you a selfie. You know what I mean?
Right,
don't worry about where they're at. If they're there at night, either A, you're doing something wrong, or B, they're just not your deer.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a tough thing to kind of, I say it's tough. It was tough for me to kind of like accept that, because there's been seasons where I'd have some like really good deer on camera and I'd be like, dude, if I could kill these deer. But truthfully, you weren't gonna kill them on my property, because that property was not a part of their core area, or if it was, the way I was hunting it caused them to like transition and change up their core area, and all I was doing was feeding deer.
But you may just push their bed further away from your property. You know what I mean? There's not going to be but so many mature buck beds in an area. So if you have a good one on your place, you need to protect it. Yeah. In my opinion, you need to let it be good.
Yes, that'll preach, dude. That's like the gospel. So we get through kind of what we've learned. Is there anything that you're planning to? I use the word improve, but I guess change would be the better word, going into next year or going into the off season?
Well, I would say be more prepared in regards to the new property. But you know me, I started preparing for next year on October 14th of this year. I was already, every hunt this year, I was preparing for next year. So, that's just who I am. Because typically, I told you in the past, if they do it this October, there's a good chance a mature deer will also do it next October.
Right.
And if they're not doing it in November, there's a good chance they're not going to be doing it the next one. There's a reason for it. You may not know the reason, but there's typically a reason behind it.
Right.
So the only thing I'll do different is just be prepared, because I know where to start, whereas this year I didn't necessarily know where to start.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I agree with you that like next year's preparation kind of starts before the end of this season. It kind of starts as you're going through the season, because you should be taking notes and kind of learning as you go, and you don't have time to like readjust all the time during the season. So you've got to kind of accept that that's just going to be a next year improvement, or something that I'm going to change next year, or that's going to be a place I'm going to start out next year. I would say I learned a lot of the same stuff. I would also say I'm going to change the fact that that 150 acres I'm hunting didn't have any food this year besides the corn pile. And I do believe that if I could get a food plot or two on that place and not really run much corn, but in the food plot, maybe 1 or 2 corn piles kind of a little bit off of it. If I'll leave it alone and only hunt 2 or 3 different spots, I should be able to hold some deer in there and probably have them feeding like you want them to feed early season, I would think. So,
right.
That leads us to kind of like the last little question of the list here. Where are you going to start? You don't necessarily have a place. I say you don't have a place you're going to start. I'm going to start by trying to burn a couple different places, burn some food plots in some areas, and just try to get those things get the ball rolling on these things, the sooner the better for me.
Yeah.
I'm one of those that likes to procrastinate.
Yes, you are. I'll start just with boots on the ground. I started really yesterday for next year. Mm-hmm. I'll send you pictures, but because it's a new place, I haven't walked the whole place. I haven't seen half the place. I put cameras here, there, and everywhere, but that only tells us part of the story, right?
Mm-hmm. So that motorcycle that just fired up is some of those noises I was talking about. Anyways.
I plan to just put boots on the ground and just walk it, find trails, find sign.
Yeah.
And a lot of that sign may not have been made. It might have been made in January, so it may not be relevant until the next January, but it does give you an idea of possibly where to be next January, right?
Yeah.
And if there's a beat down trail, typically those are going to be historical trails, so they might be good the whole year. They may not be good the whole year. Creek crossings, et cetera, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I skipped over that. Me and you've already talked about that. That is something I'm going to do, especially at my house. I'm probably going to do it up there on that 150 acres too. I want to walk some places I think for me, it's good to walk trails postseason to get an idea, kind of put yourself in the feet of the deer and see what they're seeing. Like I didn't come into hunting with a bunch of woodsmanship. You kind of grew up in it more so than I did. So you kind of had some woodsmanship about you when you got to be, 17, 18, 19 years old. I'm just now learning a lot of this stuff too. And I think for folks that are listening, if you're new to it, walking your property is something you absolutely need to do right now. If your season's out, I think folks need to do it because like you said, you need to know where those trails are. You need to know where those creek crossings are. You need to understand how the deer are using that property. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting in the same spots, probably having the same kind of season next year as you did this year.
Right. And if you want to spice it up, fill your backpack cooler up with some bush lights and hit the trails and take your 22 and shoot squirrels while you're doing it.
I think squirrel season,
I think squirrel season goes out in March, I believe.
Yeah.
So, make it fun.
Yeah.
That's kind of what me and her planned on doing this year. Let's just
taking the kids and
I don't want to leave the kids at home because they can't walk the hills, but we'll stuff the backpack cooler.
Spring them up.
We'll stuff the backpack cooler and we'll walk with the 22 looking for deer sign. If I see a squirrel, we'll shoot it while we're at it.
Oh yeah. Heck yeah. So I think kind of getting to the end of this. First of all, this is not a podcast that I wanted to do that was going to be like really lengthy and long as the episodes go because number one, nobody has time to really sit down for an hour and a half and listen to people talk. Number two, we've got too much to do and I'm like already ready to go start walking properties after listening to you talk because it just gets me so fired up about next year. But the last topic I want to talk about today is one that I think will be interesting to some people. It may not be interesting to everybody, but it's something me and you have talked a lot about, I would say, in the last year or so. Protein and feeding protein to deer. Obviously, it's a good thing. I'm not saying that it's bad by no means. It's a great thing. It's supplementing their diet, their nutrition, all that good stuff. But when I first started, I don't want to say first started hunting, but when me and you first really started talking back and forth about hunting, I always talked about wanting to grow deer. And I think that you can, but I think that not everybody can because of the fact that you don't really have exactly what you need to grow deer. Deer are they're free range animals. So if you got 40 acres like I got, and you're thinking feeding protein is going to grow your bucks for next year, would you say that's true or false, Myrick?
I would say that's false. I think the biggest misconception, first off, with feeding protein is you're changing their genetics. I think you're more or less changing genetic expression.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You're trying to help them express their maximum potential. Mm-hmm. But with 40 acres, I would say no. You're not going to grow deer. I would say you'd be better off focusing on habitat improvement and how can I get a mature deer to live on my property during the day. Yeah. A feeder full of protein pellets is not going to make that deer live there during the day.
Right.
I could put a feeder in the middle of a 40-acre pasture and get big bucks on camera at night all day long.
That's right.
That's not the goal, right?
Yeah.
I would say in order to improve, let's say improve their genetics, not really improving genetics, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
You would need more land to where those deer that you're feeding
Mm-hmm.
aren't necessarily leaving you every year. You know, you need 2,000 or 3,000 acres, and you might see some benefit from that.
Right.
But if you got 40 acres and you've been feeding that doe protein pellets all year, and she tells her 2 buck fawns, "Hey, life is good, let's be big."
Uh-huh.
Well, guess what? She's going to push those fawns off to somebody else, and somebody else is going to kill your big deer that you just fed, right?
Yeah, very true.
You know, you might help in the sense of making a 120 or 125
Mm-hmm.
per se, but you're not going to make a 120 or 140.
I agree.
You know,
that
takes years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
That's
I think,
not gonna just be a
I think
switch.
something else that's not really taken into account is that the deer's potential at 5.5, like what he could be, that starts when his feet hit the ground, like out of his mama's womb. Like if he don't have
I
really
say it
good
starts
nutrition,
beforehand.
I mean, like while he's in his mama, like if she ain't
Right.
healthy, then he's just SOL. But
Right.
I think that folks don't really realize that a deer that's 4.5, you're not really changing him, no matter who you are. If you hadn't had that deer his entire life, you're not really good. I mean, you have had no effect on him.
No, and like I said, you might put 2 to 5 inches on it
Right.
because you just laid it to him, and he's just at the right time.
That's right. He was tearing it up.
You know, and all this is just me assuming. I'm not a scientist. So
That's right. We didn't go to school for this.
Now, I will say, if you have that deer from 4, 5, and 6, if you feed him heavy protein from 4, 5, and 6,
Yeah,
you could see some kind of improvement from that.
I could see that.
You know, but
That makes sense.
being the region that we hunt, how many deer make it past 4? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How many deer make it past 5? I would say very few, because everybody's goals and expectations are different. I mean,
Yeah.
to each his own. If you want to shoot a 2-year-old, by all means, fire him up. Let's
That's
take a
right.
picture.
That's
You
right.
know, but so I would say it's harder here.
Mm-hmm.
And people up north may disagree, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I know we kind of got off topic there, but
Interesting. Well, I mean,
You get where I'm going
that's
with
good stuff. I mean, I think that a lot of folks kind of find themselves like we do, where, I mean, you don't really have 1,000 acres all blocked up that you can really grow them. I mean, you just got to try to do your best to get the best deer that's around that area to live on your property or live close enough and daylight on your property.
Right.
And if you can do that, then you have been successful as a deer hunter. I mean, because that's the hardest thing to do, to me.
yeah, I say instead of spending $2,000 on protein feed for your 40 acres, you spend $2,000 on making habitat improvements.
Right.
You
I
know,
agree.
make that deer want to live there.
That's right.
You know, let him get his protein from his natural browse, food that you planted.
Mm-hmm.
Because like we talked about yesterday, why did those unmanaged properties that hadn't been hunted in 10 years typically have bigger deer than a property that's been managed for 10 years, and
Right.
been hunted for 10 years?
Right.
To me, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of it's pressure-based. You know, the deer don't feel pressure, so they feel comfortable being there.
Yeah.
But it obviously shows that they can get the nutrition they need to be big without human interaction.
That's right. Yeah, they don't need no human to pour nothing to them to get to be a big deer. That's wild to me. But it's, I mean, you go to the Midwest and hunt public land, or you go somewhere and hunt public land and find a giant. Ain't nobody been pouring him corn.
No, and I mean, like Midwest, I mean, genetically speaking, I would say in the Midwest, they probably have better genetics and they're more likely to express those genetics because
Because of the habitat. I mean, the ag.
It's
and all
more
that
relevant
stuff.
there.
Mhm.
So if you find a big deer on public land, it's not because he's been blasting the protein feed. It's because
That's right.
he slipped through the cracks and he was able to age. You know,
That's
I think
right, yeah.
age structure is probably more important than,
I agree with that.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, if you can get your average deer to be 4.5 rather than 2.5, well, obviously you're not a big deer.
That's yeah.
You know,
That's true. That is true.
that's just my opinion on the matter. But
That's true. It's so common sense, though, I feel like.
I think people make it hard because of what they show on TV. And
Yeah, well, that's what kind of got me lost in the sauce was, I mean, growing up, that's all I watched was outdoor channel, and I mean, every time you turn the TV on, somebody's shooting a 180, and they're doing it like in this huge food plot, or they're doing it like in the middle of this huge hardwood timber bottom or something, and they've been feeding him all year long. But again, I mean, it's not relevant to what we have to deal with. I mean, like, we got 40.
Can you do it here? Yes.
Yes, that's right. I'm not saying you can't. Yeah.
Is it extremely unlikely? I would say so.
Yeah.
How many wide open hardwood bottoms have you sat in and just a 180 just come tipping through there?
I'm scrolling through.
Care in the world, right?
Yeah.
If he does step in there, he's probably going to be running out of there before he really gets going.
He's going to turn around and think, man, I'm lost in this place.
Yeah, what am I doing? I ain't ready yet.
I know. Yeah.
I don't know. And there's nothing against the Midwest. I mean, I wish we had that opportunity.
Well, I mean, that's something that, I mean, I would love to do. I mean, I've hunted Illinois once. It was not a success. I guess you could say I learned a ton. Didn't see a bunch of deer, but it's definitely something I want to do. I mean, I think it's something I believe everybody should probably go experience. I've got friends that have been, like my brother-in-law's dad goes up there every year. He's been going for probably 20 years or longer, and he said that he said it ain't nothing to see 20 or 30 130-inch bucks just running everywhere. I mean, like deer that folks would light them up down here.
And we get one on camera and we're trying to figure out how the heck we can kill him.
Yeah, how to kill him.
But and if we don't, we're like, hey, the season was a failure.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I mean, it's just, if that's all you watch or if that's all you know, then it's going to make hunting around here be real tough and real boring. And that's kind of how it got for me until I started listening and learning some of the stuff that we've talked about today.
Yeah, I would say don't define your success off of what they're doing in the Midwest.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say set a realistic goal for your property.
Yeah.
And if you reach that goal that year, then you have a successful season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to what you said before. I mean, shoot the best deer you got. I mean,
right. If your goal was to kill 3 115s that year and you reach that goal, pat yourself on the back. Do it again next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, let me sell some more bait. Hang on. You there?
Yep.
All right. Well, I would say that for the first little podcast, dude, that's pretty good information right there. Especially you're hunting in the South, in Georgia, Alabama, maybe North Florida too. Anywhere that you really don't have much say-so in kind of the property that you hunt, you just gonna have to do the best you can with what you got.
I feel like it went pretty good.
I do too. I mean, it's the first one, so as we go week to week, I think it'll get better. Obviously, as we get into turkey season, we'll talk about some turkey stuff. That's fun to me. Myrick hadn't done as much turkey hunting. I think it's good that I kind of lean on you for deer season, and hopefully as you get into turkey hunting in the next few years, you'll be able to lean on me some. I don't know a bunch, but I've killed a few, you know.
Learn how not to choke on the mouth call. That'll be a good start.
That'll be a start. That will definitely be a start. So
why don't you end the podcast with some advice, like one tip?
One tip, I would say.
One tip. You could give one tip, what would it be?
If I could give you one tip, I would say that you need to be a student of the game. And like, we were baseball players, so I mean, student of the game to me is one of those people that kind of learns from their mistakes and they study up on kind of, I mean, the topic of what they're doing. I think that folks need to be a student of deer. They need to know about deer and kind of what their life consists of, what they're trying to do day in and day out. I think they need to study up on past hunts and past seasons, what went wrong, what didn't go, or what went right, and take that knowledge and apply it to the next year. I know for myself, I had a lot of seasons, probably 3 or 4 of them that were kind of spanned right there together where they were basically the same across the board. Like I didn't see a bunch of deer, never saw a shooter. I had maybe some pictures of some good deer, but I was continually doing the same thing every year, like hunting the same places the same way. And finally, I kind of started studying a little more and learning, listening to you, asking questions, and kind of becoming more of a student of the game. So if I had one piece of advice to somebody listening, that's what I'd tell you. If you want to do anything, you got to be a student of the game if you want to be good at it. That's kind of how I feel.
Right. And I would say if you stop learning, then obviously you should be a master, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you should learn something new every year, whether it be learn something about the property or even learn something about yourself.
For sure. I agree with that. So for the first episode of the Hunt More Official Podcast, I think we hit a triple. I wouldn't say we hit a home run, but triples were freaking exciting to me, and I think that's what we just did. We hit a triple. So, folks, if you're listening, I hope you tune in next week. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go and do that. Maybe you've just now tuned in to Hunt More Official. I hope you'll go back and kind of sort back through some of the episodes that are available on our YouTube channel. There's some things to learn for sure. You can learn from our mistakes. I think that's another good thing that you can do is learn from other people's mistakes. So, thank you for tuning in, guys. We'll catch you next week. This is Jonathan Moore and Hunter Myrick cashing out. We'll see you.